My name is Ben Tatta. I'm the president of the media division of Cablevision, which is a large cable system in the Northeast. We service the New York tri-state area, about 3 million subscribers. And if everything goes as planned, we'll soon be part of Altice, which obviously all of you have probably heard more of than Cablevision. What I wanted to do today, Paul Haddad, who runs our data and analytics group, did a really great job kind of capturing the essence of what we do on the data analytics front for advertisers and programmers. I thought for today's purpose, I'd take a step back and really show examples of what we're doing with the audience data at an enterprise level, meaning internal applications as well as external applications. But just by way of background, we've been collecting census-level audience data for a little over 3 years. In our subscriber footprint, that translates to about 7 million set-top boxes, a little north of that, and 2.6 million households. This is second-by-second data that's captured in real time and then pulled back into our data warehouse. But it's really just a portion of the total data that we have available, since we do a lot of work appending the data. And at the risk of throwing an eye chart out there, I wanted to give you a sense of kind of the breadth of the data. And at the bottom are really the different data sources that we have to work with. On the left is the audience data. But what we do, because we're also a subscription-based service, is append attributes to that data so that we can get much more dimension in terms of the household attributes for both advertiser purposes as well as programmer purposes. And then that data then gets pushed up through our analytics team. And I'll isolate just that piece of it just so it's less busy, to support the different constituents internally. So everything from product management that's looking at maybe the usage of a new guide or a new feature, our programming group that could use the audience data to determine the best channel position, to determine the value that we should kind of deem for any new network that gets added to the dial, all the way to our engineering group, which is really looking at kind of network utilization and bandwidth optimization. The real opportunity that we've had in the last couple of years is to monetize the data in the marketplace. And that's really been across 3 particular areas. On the advertising side of the business, which obviously this data becomes really valuable when it comes to addressable advertising. We were one of the first to roll that out a few years ago. But when we first rolled out, we didn't have the census-level audience data, so we really could only take it so far. Since we've introduced the audience data, that coupled with addressable is really a powerful way to kind of transform the way television advertising works, whether it's on linear platforms or nonlinear platforms. And then also with programmers, being able to get much deeper insights beyond just ratings. And I'll give you a few examples of this as we move along. So one of the first things when we started to compile the data that we learned was that there was a lot of viewing that wasn't measured. The top 40 networks on the dial get relatively good treatment from Nielsen using their sample. The issue is we have hundreds of networks on the dial. And when you start to look at the viewership, there really is a long tail. And these are networks ranked 40 and above. And you can even see it network ranked 140. You're talking about upwards of 10% reach within the footprint, which is pretty significant. And when you add all this up, it translates to north of 22% of viewing is not measured. So me on the ad sales side, trying to monetize every impression, the fact that 20-some-odd% of my impressions aren't measured creates a big issue. So that's why going forward, as more data becomes available, I think that linear television is actually going to grow a lot more aggressively than some of the industry stats, based on the fact that currently 20% of the consumption today is not measured or monetized in an adequate fashion. And when you couple that with the ability of serving addressable ads, you're really selling audiences. So our ability to aggregate these audiences and sell those at a real efficient CPM is much more compelling since we have the data. So what we did when we started to uncover a lot of this was then build out a productized offering for advertisers so that we could kind of inject data into the 3 main steps of the workflow, of any media workflow. On the planning stage, instead of using Nielsen to get age and gender-based attributes, we can use both third-party and first-party data so that a client can actually see ratings through their own lens. So if they want to look at frequent travelers that are members of the rewards program, or households in market for an upscale SUV with the credit worthiness to actually pull the trigger, we can actually marry that data on the front end and then provide ratings report or index reports to advertisers. Then it's really just a question of how they want to execute the campaign. Do they want to just do what we call an optimized linear approach, where they roll up all those networks that kind of over-index against their demo and run a conventional linear campaign? Or do they want to just isolate those segments of audiences that they're trying to go after to serve them uniquely tailored ads? In the middle part of the phase is really media optimization. This isn't like a one-time thing. I think one of the unique aspects of having census-level data in near real time is that we can optimize in much more compressed cycles. You know, in the past, you kind of run a campaign 4 to 6 weeks, you get your as-run report or your campaign report, and then you might make some changes based on how the networks were delivering. In our case, every other day we're optimizing the campaigns because viewing is very volatile, especially when you do tap into that long tail inventory. Things change dramatically day in and day out. So our ability to react to that is much more akin to kind of digital optimization that's so common today. And optimization and television just haven't been married in the past. This data will help us get there. And then finally, and most importantly, is the campaign measurement on the back end. In some cases, advertisers are really just looking at the effective reach against those households in market for an upscale SUV. In other cases, they'll match the ad exposure data, which we get in census form, against their KPI data. And it could be traffic to the website, it could be coupon redemption, and it could be sales. And in a lot of the addressable campaigns, we kind of encourage a match back because you can actually see the effect of both targeting and copy and offer and the effect on sale beyond just the media. So the next step after we productize this offering was to automate it, automate the process. There's a lot of discussion about programmatic. I think it's going to happen in steps. You know, the real big opportunity that we saw was just automating the front end of the planning process so the data would be available to clients and agencies. They could plug in their own attributes and get a sense of what would be the most optimized schedule to run. So we built something called the Total Audience Application that has all of the inventory data and availability and all of the audience data, and it allows buyers and advertisers the ability to plug in their attributes and get an immediate view on how much reach can they generate in our marketplace against how many impressions over what period of time. In this case, they don't select which networks they want to run in. They actually just suppress networks that are kind of on a blacklist, so the campaign can run really broad. And what we found is it's a great way to maximize reach, since a lot of these networks were never measured before. And then in terms of the standard campaign reports, you know, the left is kind of like, you know, yesterday's world. At the end of the campaign, you get a linear as-run report that shows how many spots ran against which networks and day parts and how many GRPs. On the right is an example of what we're delivering, which is, you know, impressions by network and segment. So if a client had 3 or 4 different, say, auto segments, upscale SUV, mid-level sedan, we could actually cut the impressions report based on how many impressions were delivered against each of those target audiences. And then we can also do live versus DVR for those clients that are really interested in understanding the effect of time shifting. And then finally, conversion analytics, which is really kind of, you know, where the gold is, just because clients can really get a good sense of what their ROI is for television. And then in some cases, we'll include digital data in the matchback to see the effect of cross-platform migration and pathing. So I think a lot of what's done right now in digital is based on last-click attribution, so you really don't get a sense of how much television is driving, and it really is amazing to see the effect of TV and the impact that it has across all the other platforms. And over time, as this measurement becomes more unified, we'll be able to see that with a little more clarity. An example of what we do for programmers is what we call a programmer dashboard. This is great for networks that have never been rated because they not only get ratings, but they can actually see much more dimension on a show level, on a separation between avid viewers and casual viewers, as well as, you know, trends on a month-over-month basis. So again, a lot of the goal is to take a lot of this raw data and productize it in ways and develop visualization so that it can be easily consumed and kind of translated to actionable insights rather than just raw information. I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is really refining the data so that it can be actionable. And dashboards are a great way to do that. Another example I'll show you, which was kind of interesting, a couple of years ago, the Super Bowl, not this last round where Denver clearly was the winner. Back in 2014, they literally got their ass kicked. And what was interesting was that I was there, and I remember about the third quarter, I'm like, is anyone even watching this at this point? Because it was so lopsided. So we pulled the audience data, and sure enough, after it became really lopsided, 29-0, there was a 5%, the biggest dip in viewership happened soon thereafter. So we just assumed it became so lopsided, people tuned out. But when we followed where those viewers went, the largest percentage of those viewers went to the premiere of Downton Abbey, which to us was like unimaginable. Like, the Super Bowl audience and Downton Abbey. I think it was a change of control over the remote in the house was really what was going on. But it's a great example of how you can make these kind of baseline assumptions based on ratings. But with analytics, you can go one level deeper. And the other thing that was interesting with this was that the ratings, despite the fact that it was so lopsided, if you look at just the shape of the arc, I mean, there wasn't a material decline. And ironically, Downton Abbey had the biggest impact on it. So it was interesting to share that with Fox. They had no idea that would be the case. So I think they're running tune-in ads for this year's Super Bowl on Downton Abbey. So I'll finish with an example of kind of how we are rolling all of this up. I had a live demo. This is just a screenshot from it, which gives a view of all of the video consumption through our platform. So in the upper left, you can see it broken down by all live linear, VOD, DVR, pay-per-view, and the Optimum app. And what's interesting is when you roll all this up, ratings on a year-over-year basis are flat. They're not down 8 to 10%, like the conventional measurement service in the States would lead you to believe. Ratings are actually flat. And when you look at where the growth is, and it really ties back to the previous presentation, that nonlinear consumption is really where the growth is. And what's interesting here is our Optimum app, which is really our over-the-top offering, is not only growing, but when you drill down in terms of the demos of growth, one would think that the young audiences are really driving the majority of growth on the Optimum app. That's not the case. The majority of growth is coming from retired age households, which blew us away. And the other thing that was interesting is when you just filter this based on millennials, so look at all of the consumption across millennials, everything is up, including live linear. So again, it's I think one of these assumptions that because obviously there's a tremendous amount of consumption on connected devices among millennials, the assumption is that it's eroding linear, and it's not. It's just that they consume more video across the board. And I think that's one of the things that we really need to be aware of, because it really strikes to the heart of the measurement problem that we have, especially in the States, where we're still relying on a sample. In our marketplace of 3 million households, there's 365 people meters. So we have twice as many channels on our dial than there are people meters to measure them. So you don't need a data scientist to really figure out what's wrong. Clearly, I think where we're going is actually bodes well for all connected devices. I think this notion too that TV is somewhat contentious with applications is not the case at all. I mean, we embrace IP. We were the first MSO to actually load Netflix on our network to deliver a better Netflix experience. And I think over time, obviously the lines will blur, but one thing I will say is that television-grade content is really the differentiator. And I think when we look at ad engagement and ad effectiveness, television-grade content online versus user-generated content online, beyond just the context, the effectiveness of a conventional spot is much greater within that commercial-grade content. I wouldn't say that's a reason to oversaturate and put too many ads in and drive up the ad load, which is one of the reactions some of the programmers are taking now. But it does show you that the ad effectiveness within a commercial television-grade content is powerful, regardless of which device you consume it on. So I'm looking forward to the discussion. I'll be here to take questions, but for now, I think we'll move on.
So maybe if there's a couple of questions now, or we can hold them. Well, I had one. So just
sure.
Given the detailed metrics you've got there versus the 365 you had on the panel sample. How have you exposed the accuracy or inaccuracy, I won't lead the question, of the panel-based approach? Have you got significant view on the accuracy of that approach?
Well, I showed what wasn't measured, because of the zero cell problem, networks that are too small to measure zero cell. When you roll all that up in the long tail, it's north of 20%. In the top 40, it can vary from low single digits to 20, 30% variance in our marketplace. And it changes. I mean, that's the thing. It's not consistent, especially with sports and news events, things that are really, this year, big political year, obviously, it changes the whole consumption pattern on the dial. So that creates instability in a sample-based approach because you have a limited number of households that are really determining viewing. So, I mean, I liken it to the benefit of like a focus group versus like really quantitative analysis. It's a large focus group. And, even though, I say that, and on the same side of the house, we generate, a significant amount of revenue based on that currency. I just think over time that currency changes. Right now, about 30% of all of our advertising we're posting against. So it's either impression-based or it's addressable. And I think that number will grow, and I think ratings just become irrelevant over time.
Thanks. So I'm sure we'll have more questions later on, but thanks very much, Ben.
My pleasure.